Hello, so don't worry, I know what you're thinking. I haven't turned into a lifestyle guru. I know today's title sounds like it comes straight out of some kind of self-help book, but I'm not suggesting that you live your best life or anything pretentious like that. No, I'm too cynical and too British for that. No, what I'm talking about today are the constraints placed upon us in our work. And even then, I'm not really suggesting that you just throw them off permanently willy-nilly. I'm just saying that occasionally we should be challenging them. You see, part of being a designer is learning how to work within constraints. If you want to work free from constraints, go ahead, become an artist and live in poverty. No, seriously though, constraints can be helpful. They can provide us with focus and ensure that we produce pragmatic, real-world solutions. Unfortunately, however, sometimes they can become debilitating. For example, I'm currently working with 3 separate clients, all of which are battling with different types of constraints. One is crippled by its legacy technology. Another one works in a highly regulated industry. And the third is battling with self-imposed and, in my opinion, pretty short-sighted targets. In each case, they're so fixated on their constraints that they're struggling to find a way forward. And they're not alone in that. We've all battled with constraints sometimes, haven't we? They go from providing a framework within which we can operate to becoming this straitjacket that stifles our creative thinking. You see, this is really common specifically in well-established companies. And it's a real contrast that you see in a sector when you see the constraints that well-established companies struggle with when compared to newer digital disruptors. The new companies are free from that kind of legacy and cultural constraints that cripple their well-established competitors, and that is why they are disruptors. Take, for example, something like banking, a highly regulated sector with many constraints. Now, I bank with both Halifax, which is a well-established bank here in the UK, and Starling, that's a new digital disruptor. Now, in theory, they both work within the same regulatory constraints, yet the difference in experience between the two could not be more extreme. For example, logging into online banking, the most basic of things you want to do these days with a bank, with Halifax is painful compared to the effortless experience I have with Starling. Yet they've both got the same security constraints. Halifax requires me to remember a username, and that username, by the way, has to have numerical values in it and special characters, a password, and in addition to that, a memorable phrase that has to have both numbers and letters in it. While Starling simply requires me to have my mobile phone number and remember that. Then they send a message to my smartphone. I click on that, photograph the QR code on my website, and I'm in. So all I need to have is my smartphone and remember my telephone number. Even I can manage that. The difference is not that they are constrained by different regulations. It's not even just the regulations that are constraining them. What's constraining them is thinking. In Halifax's case, it's the thinking and the legacy that is crippling them. Halifax is crippled by years of working in a certain way. And these are kind of artificial constraints, if you will. So does that mean that well-established companies like Halifax are doomed to offer a weaker experience than digital disruptors? Well, not necessarily. They just need to throw off those constraints and dream bigger occasionally. Because constraints can cloud our thinking and stifle our creativity. Every now and again, in any organisation of any size, we need to step back and start with a blank sheet of paper once in a while. What if we had no constraints? What if we could just produce the best experience possible? What if we created a prototype which didn't constrain us, where we didn't think about the various constraints we had to work within? When well-established companies do this, the results are quite shocking, to be honest. When the UK government did this, they revolutionised government online. going from hundreds of government departmental websites to a single source of information UK citizens could turn to when they needed help. Equally, when Disney prototyped their Disney Magic Band experience, the company invested $1 billion in upgrading their parks and hotels. And that shows you just how powerful an unconstrained prototype could be. After all, $1 billion is a blooming big price tag. It's a big way of constraining projects if you turn around and say you want to spend $1 billion. The power of a prototype free from constraints is that it can show what is possible. It excites people and inspires them. When people can see the possibilities, they want to make that a reality. And that is when constraints start to get challenged. Some constraints will just crumble in the face of a compelling prototype. Technology gets upgraded, internal thinking changes, and money gets found. However, even with fixed constraints such as regulatory requirements, things still improve. Thinking becomes more creative, and compromising that ideal experience becomes really obvious if you have to start hacking away at that wonderful vision. And that encourages people to push harder to maintain that vision, to maintain that dream. A prototype free from constraints sets a new baseline in organizational thinking. So what do I mean by that? Well, instead of asking, how do we incrementally improve what we already have? The question becomes, how do we achieve the vision that we've created? And those are very different starting points. So the next time you feel yourself getting bogged down in constraints, suggest stepping back and creating a lightweight, inexpensive prototype that ignores those constraints and see what happens. You may well be shocked by the result.